Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Comics Lair for Into Battle with the Birds of Prey, our discussion of DC Comics' Birds of Prey in their various incarnations. The Comics Lair is sponsored by Heroes Aren't Hard to Find and Heroes Convention. I'm your host, Nancy Northcott, and we'll start with the panel introducing themselves and telling us briefly why they like the Birds of Prey. Bobby, you want to start?
Sure. Hi, I'm Bobby Nash. I'm a longtime comics fan. I stumbled upon Birds of Prey when they did the one-shot back in 1999. Picked it up on a lark. It was not something I was looking for. It was just kind of one of those, this looks interesting, and fell in love with it and have been a fan of that iteration of these characters for quite a while.
John?
Basically the same as Bobby. When I was growing up, I was a comic book fan. I fell back into the comics with Batman: The Dark Knight Returns, and I've been reading them ever since. And I forget why I picked up the original 1996 Birds of Prey, written by Chuck Dixon, but I loved it. And as they started coming out with the one-shots and the mini-series, I just followed it, and I liked the idea of basically the women of, basically it highlighted the women of DC in a practical manner rather than a female version of a male hero, or the one who has to be rescued by the male or something like that. I just thought it was a wonderful take on the whole superhero universe.
Fraser?
I am Fraser Sherman, historical fantasy writer and long time comics reader. I saw it on the stands like in 1996, and I'm not sure why I picked it up, possibly because I like Black Canary and I liked Oracle, possibly because I like Chuck Dixon's writing. But I think I grew to like the series because we've got two good characters, a lot of good stories. That's a pretty basic formula and it works. And also the fact that it is two female leads rather than, say, Batman and Superman or Captain America and Winter Soldier made it novel, and it still stands out that way.
Wayland?
I've been reading comics pretty steadily since the mid-1980s or so. I used to co-own a comic book shop. I've got a novel series out about superhuman mercenaries, so I'm something of a hero geek. I also have been reading Birds of Prey since that first special. I do know exactly why I picked it up. Barbara Gordon has always been one of my favorite characters, and I've always really liked Dinah as well. So the two of them together, and especially the way it was pitched to me by the guy running the shop at the time, is like Oracle is running Mission Impossible. I was like, okay, I got to take a look at that, and it's been fantastic ever since.
And Mel?
So my name's Mel Todd. I have about 40 different novels out. I write mostly sci-fi, fantasy, urban fantasy. And I'm extremely impressed because I think this is one of the few times I'm the youngest person in this group. I don't remember when I picked this up, and you guys are remembering what year you saw it. Oh my gosh. I don't even remember where I was in 96. But if I remember correctly, I actually got to Birds of Prey via The Huntress because two reasons. A, it was a female superhero who clashed a lot with Batman, which I thought was really interesting. And B, her outfit was purple. I was like, you get bonus points for the purple. But then when they pulled her in, I got relatively invested in Oracle and the idea of somebody being perfectly competent, and the fact that they didn't do... I mean, Oracle as Oracle was always in a wheelchair, and at no point did they ever treat her as if she was less or disabled. It was just really nice to see that sort of stuff. I personally always thought Black Canary was an underutilized character. I still kind of feel that. And I mean, come on, be serious. Who runs around in fishnet stockings? They're uncomfortable and they don't stay up.
Yeah, well, this was also, too, when that one shot came out, it was right after Dinah had really, the character had been put through the ringer over in the Green Arrow comic.
Yep, Mike
So
Grell.
this was kind of like a I don't want to say reinvention, but it was kind of like lifting her up because they had put her really through the ringer.
Well, speaking of lifting her up, I think it's called Batman Chronicles. John Ostrander and the late Kim Yale wrote the origin story of Oracle, which is an amazing story. And those of you who've seen these panels before know that I write historical fantasy for Falstaff Books, some subgenres of romance, and with Jeannie Adams, science fiction. I've been reading Birds of Prey irregularly because when Birds of Prey was really taking off, it was a time in my life where I wasn't reading comics much and wasn't paying attention to them very much. And then I stumbled across an issue, and I've always liked Black Canary, fishnet stockings notwithstanding. Fishnet stockings were in style when I was in junior high school, and I can tell you they are very uncomfortable to sit on, and they snag on everything. So if they're stainless steel so they don't snag on everything, they're even more uncomfortable to sit on. I mean, that's just not a good question. But Barbara Gordon is one of my all-time favorite comic book characters. And when I read the origin story of Oracle, it clicked. It's like, that totally makes sense. And I went back and read the Suicide Squad story that she first appeared kind of behind the scenes in. And I'll buy most comic books if they have Barbara Gordon in them. There are one or two I've stopped buying because I didn't care for them. But by and large, I will buy them if she's in it. And I always liked Black Canary, even back in the days when she and Wonder Woman were in the Justice League and there was a big battle and people were hurt. And Flash said to them, "You two take care of the wounded and we'll handle the fight." Seriously? So, yeah. So how could I not like it? Because as somebody said, I think it was John, it was an all-women comic book, and those are thin on the ground. They always were. There are more of them now, but they're still
especially in the 90s,
Yeah. I mean, it was just not, that was rare.
Yeah. And I like, was it Mel who said that Barbara Gordon was Oracle, but she was also, outside of Daredevil, and there really weren't that many disabled superheroes who were, there were some superheroes who were disabled, but then because of their disability had to, retire or whatever. But
or it was stuff like, technically Cyborg was horribly disabled, but all of it's overcome with tech, so there's no functional difference. Daredevil, yes, he's blind, but his echolocation is so good he can do everything but read. They always made it so it didn't have an impact. And Oracle was in a wheelchair. She couldn't stand, she couldn't run, and they were honest to that.
Yes, they quite often had scenes of her while she's talking to Dinah. She's exercising, she's doing strength training because to amplify like her strength in her arms because she couldn't kick anymore. She was I like that she wasn't just someone who just sat around expecting
when they shifted her focus of styles to Eskrima, I was sitting there going, "Oh, that makes such perfect sense. That is a wonderful choice."
And back when they had letter columns, which I truly miss, but somebody wrote in, and I don't know if this was a disabled person or who knew a disabled person who was in a wheelchair, and they said, "You really need to stop drawing the hand grips on the back of her wheelchair."
Yep.
Because she shouldn't need them.
Yeah.
And then shortly after that, they did stop drawing, and they actually made a point. She's running some errands, and somebody said, offered to, you need a push, and she said, "There's no handles on the back of the wheelchair or back of the chair." She never called it the wheelchair. It was always for a reason. I thank you very much, but I can get around this.
Well, in Birds of Prey #8, which is Barbara Gordon and Dick Grayson essentially on a date at the circus, though they don't call it that, she says to him, "I don't like to be pushed." And she's talking about the relationship discussion they've just had, but you can see that it also carries over to the rest of it. And since we're talking about Barbara and all of us obviously like her, is she your favorite member of the Birds of Prey, or is somebody else? And if whoever is your favorite, why is that? And John, will you start?
Sure. Well, let's face it. Without Barbara Gordon, it's not really the Birds of Prey. at least in my opinion. But yeah, she was my favorite character. But there's some minor characters who, I really like, and I kind of miss. I miss what was her name? Misfit, the Batgirl wannabe, who sort of became a mascot to the team, and who developed this habit of literally popping in and out of things.
Oh, the one who's always yelling "Dark Vengeance."
Mhm.
Yes, like that.
Charlie something.
And there was I knew it this morning. I knew it this afternoon. There was a woman who had the power of borrowing other powers from
Black Alice.
Black Alice. Yep.
Black Alice, right? And for a while, she was a member, and I kind of like the way they did with. I think she comes back every once in a while, but I like those characters. I will be honest, in deference to those who like them, I've never been a big fan of this incarnation of the Huntress, mainly because I really, really liked
Yeah, I did too. Helena Wayne.
Helena Wayne as the as Batman as the Earth 2 Huntress, Batman's daughter, and all that.
Mhm.
That was to me when Earth 2 Dick Grayson and Earth 2 Huntress were killed after the Crisis. I'm going, no, that hit me harder than Supergirl or the Flash.
Yeah. Fraser?
I would probably go with Barbara and Black Canary tied. I mean, they started out as the core team. And to me, if you've got them, you have a workable Birds of Prey setup. If you have only one of them on an ongoing basis rather than one of them's just taking a vacation, I don't feel like it is Birds of Prey. Barbara, not necessarily my preferred character, but definitely Oracle should be at the heart of the team. So she is probably slightly more core than Dinah, but only slightly.
Wayland?
Definitely Barbara, having her just slightly edge out Dinah, but I do like both of them a great deal. I loved the way they transitioned Barbara from Batgirl to Oracle, the sort of backdoor origin they gave her in Suicide Squad when she was going under the name Amy Beddoes. And then the first several issues of Birds of Prey, where it was just her and Dinah, I thought were some phenomenal storytelling.
Mel?
I liked seeing Barbara make her own place in the world, regardless of what Batman thought. I actually enjoyed her pretty much flipping him and Dick off, saying, "This is what I'm going to do. I don't care if you approve or not approve." I honestly was never that big of a Black Canary fan. She never, in a world where you have Wonder Woman, you have Flash and stuff, she could do martial arts, okay? Most of them could do martial arts. And she had a scream that was never utilized correctly, as far as I could see. Now, I didn't read the Green Arrow and stuff, so I didn't even realize she and Oliver Queen had been married until probably 20 years later, because it just wasn't anything I followed. But I loved both incarnations of the Huntress. I loved the idea that she was actually a mafia, the head of the mafia's daughter, who was like trying to repay for the sins of her family, and then her being the daughter of Catwoman and Batman was also kind of cool too. And I was reading it inconsistently enough that I never really knew which Huntress you were getting. It was like, wait, which one's this? And that kind of made it fun, because it was interesting seeing somebody who both was either trying to prove herself to her father or trying to prove herself to her father. And it was interesting that they would have that juxtaposition for the same character.
That's one of the problems DC has created for themselves right now, when they're sort of trying to hold on to the edges of that horrible reboot they did. Because at the moment in DC continuity, there are two Huntresses running around, and they just do their best to never mention that fact. But the Helena is back, the one that you were just talking about, and the one who was the head of the spy organization when Dick Grayson was working for Spiral. They're both in current continuity.
Yeah.
And they just sort of pop up in different places, and no one has ever put together the fact that there are two huntresses named Helena.
How many Flashes are there? So
Yeah.
How many Spider-Men now?
multiple characters having the same name.
So, Bobby,
I'm
what
not a
about
fan
you?
of that trend, but it is a trend.
Yeah, it is. Bobby, what about you?
When I started reading Birds of Prey, I already loved Barbara. So I went in. She was probably my favorite when I went in. I liked Dinah, but I was not as big a fan follower of Dinah. Birds of Prey made me love Dinah as a character. So I would say at the start it was definitely Barbara, but as the series went along, I came to really appreciate Dinah as a character, because up till that point, she was always someone's sidekick. Mm-hmm. It was Green Arrow and Black Canary, or she was a member of the Justice League, or she didn't have her own identity really. And this series kind of gave her that. She kind of decides to take like command of her destiny. And it just so happens that Oracle's offer comes at just the right time that allows her to do that. And it made me appreciate the character of Dinah so much more.
I think my favorite Dinah scene ever was during one of the runs of Justice League where she was in charge. And mm-hmm. Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman have been having these sort of secret meetings off to one side. And she comes in with her own chair and just puts down this folding chair. Is like, so am I in charge or not? What are you three doing? And it was such a beautifully done scene.
Mm-hmm.
There was a
go on.
They had it was in the I forget who rebooted it, but it was when it was like Guy Gardner was the Green Lantern attached and all that, and alert.
Oh, the Bwahaha years, the funny years.
Yeah. Oh, it was after that.
Oh, it was after.
Basically, it was Dinah Dinah gets the message, she gets the alert, and it's sort of like everybody, Batman says, "Well, you got the alert, that makes you in charge." He goes, "Oh, really?" Well, and then Batman just takes over.
Mm-hmm.
So much for being in charge.
Yeah. Well, do you all have? There's so many incarnations of the Birds of Prey, and I want to talk about that before we quit. But for the moment, do you have a favorite story arc? And if you do, which run is it part of? Fraser, will you start?
It's been a while since I have read them, so I could not break it down into specific story arcs. I would say definitely either Dixon or Simone rather than Tony Bedard, who was competent but not at the same level. But that's about as far as I could get it.
Okay. Wayland?
The Hunt for Oracle. It was like a 4-part crossover. I think it was Birds of Prey and Nightwing crossovers, maybe. And that's when Dinah finally met Barbara for essentially the first time as Oracle. It was a gorgeous 4-part story.
Mel, what about you?
No clue. I couldn't even tell you any of the story arcs. It's been long enough since I've read them that I was like, oh, okay, cool. What, you mean they're killing the series? Well, fudge.
I really liked The Hunt for Oracle too, in part because Barbara demonstrated what you could do if you trained and practiced and didn't have the use of your legs when she was running from Blockbuster's crew. Mm-hmm. And I was really impressed with that. And I liked that they showed that. And I liked the character dynamics both. And of course, that was in Nightwing where they retconned it so that they had actually had a relationship at some point, was part of that story sequence. But I liked the way they crossed over the two books too. Bobby, do you have a favorite?
That very first one shot still ranks pretty high on my favorite list. I also, when it went to a monthly book, that especially that first dozen or half dozen issues were just fantastic. It really kept that Mission Impossible feel to it. And then when Gail Simone came on, I was really impressed. I think Gail is a fantastic writer, and she different enough from Chuck where she added a bit more humor to it than Chuck did. But I think she also improved the relationships amongst certainly the core group, Dinah, Barbara, and Helena. I think she really kind of tightened that bond between them, and I really enjoyed that. But that very first one, that one shot, still remains a favorite.
Okay. Sean?
Like Bobby said, I really liked the one shot that established everything. But there was one that followed that. Barbara sent Dinah into, what was the island, Santa Prisca, or something. And I think the secret formula turned out to be the secret formula to one of the soft drinks that are sold in the DC universe, either soda, cola, or zesty. And the whole thing was they were trying to get the formula so that they could do that. But in the middle of Dinah basically takes a side trip into saving people and to stopping a revolution and all that. And at the end, it's like she and Barbara have this, argument, and it's Barbara saying, well, let's just keep this on a professional basis, that we don't have to be friends. And for a while, that sort of defined the relationship. They weren't friends. They were working together for a common cause, but there was no need for them to be buddy-buddy like everybody else in the DC universe. And I think that established more than anything that Dinah was her own person rather than somebody who was working for Oracle.
Yeah. Because Dinah did not know that Oracle was Barbara or had been Batgirl for quite a while.
Yeah. I also liked the stories that were in issues number 123 and 124 of the original run, where Barbara confronts the Joker. And in 124, she cleans his clock. And I thought, this is so many years overdue. It's so good to see this finally. So I really liked that one too. Does anybody want to put in a word for anything else before we move on?
There is one that just came to mind as we were talking. I don't remember issue numbers. I remember it was during the Gail Simone run. But there's a storyline where Dinah breaks her legs, or at least one of them, and she's unable to be in the field. And there's a lot of, she starts to understand Barbara a little better because she's unable to, because Barbara makes it look easy, Barbara makes it look like she could, because Barbara can do all this stuff. And I think Dinah starts to understand her partner a little better. And at that point, I think they had moved into that friendship territory. It wasn't employer, employee, or general and soldier. They were partners. Yeah.
Not Mr. Phelps and the team anymore.
Right. Because those early episodes, those early issues, Barbara was paying her a salary to do these missions. And so it very much had that, definite, break between, general and soldier or whatever. And,
Nancy, Jim Phelps, in the early issues, there was always Barbara, there was always Dinah, but in one of the early issues, you had Catwoman and the Huntress, and in another one, you had Lois Lane. So it was a Mission Impossible vibe where Barbara was bringing in the people she thought she needed, and these people were the guest stars, whereas Dinah was Barbara Bain, Martin Landau, Willie, whatever his last name was. It was one of the mainstays of the team.
Yeah. Well, does anybody want to say anything else about the comic? We'll come back to the comic in general and the different types of it, but I thought we'd move on to the TV show. Did everybody see the TV show?
Yes.
Sadly, yes.
Well, Wayland, I was going to ask you to start. So from sadly, why, and what did you like and dislike about it? I think
what got best summed up about that was a review I read of the series at one point that called it The Adventures of Batgirl, Catgirl, and Blonde Girl. I don't know why they went weird semi-near future. I don't know why they chose Batman to be dead or Huntress to have powers or Black Canary to sort of have powers, but they were never really defined and certainly nothing to do with the comic book version. I think the only good things about that series, again, just my opinion, were Dina Meyer as Barbara and that one episode where she had the Batgirl suit on. I think Shiva was the villain for that episode. Those two things were brilliant, and the entire rest of it, I was so excited when I heard about the series, and I got to the end of the first episode, and I turned to, I think it was my first wife at the time, and just like, what was that?
Mel?
So I liked it, but at the same time, we're talking CW here. This is the era of Dawson's Creek, and at least wasn't Dawson's Creek, which made it a bonus. But I like the fact that they actually were bringing in villains and characters that most people would have never seen, like Lady Shiva, bringing her in, exposing the Huntress, because most people who just are aware of pop culture, they know who Wonder Woman is, they know who Batman is. They have no idea who Huntress or Black Canary is, or some of the bad guys that they fought. I thought it was fun. My biggest issue with it was, at that point in time in my life, I was working full time, so that was just set up on the probably VHS, probably still at that time, to record, and it made it one season. 13 episodes. So just as I was like going, okay, they're starting to figure out these characters, it's starting to click. Nope, the show is canceled. It's like, I hate you, CW. I really do. I was it the best, most enlightening TV out there? Absolutely not. But at that point in time, I can't think of any other female-led series that wasn't either a med drama or a crime drama. There just wasn't. Everything else was male leads. And they actually talked a lot about some of the more... they didn't come in so heavy that they were judgy, but they talked a lot more about trying to live up to your parents' expectations of you, trying to figure out who you are in a world that defines what you have to be. And that, for me at least, was fun, especially when we're talking CW in the early 2000s.
Bobby?
Yeah, I thought the casting was really done well. I think certainly Dina Meyer as Barbara, I thought was perfect casting. The rest of the cast was fine. I had no problem with any of them. This was also a time too where it's not like now where they look at it and go, "Ooh, let's try to make the comic." It was, well, we got this idea. Let's not do a comic. Let's just take this idea and put it in something else. And yeah, the near future thing kind of was wonky, but yeah, but it's like the stories didn't grab me as much, but I did enjoy watching these actors in those roles. And I'd like to think had continued on, they would have found their rhythm, but it took a while.
Well,
yeah.
For those of you who are Criminal Minds fans, I was reviewing this and I went, oh shoot, that's right. Shemar Moore played the detective in the series. And I'm like, oh, he was just as yummy back then as he is now.
Yeah.
And now he's on SWAT.
Yeah. And there's a lot of the girl that played young Dinah, because there were two Dinahs, we found we had her mother later. Yeah. Young Dinah went on to have quite the career doing things like Lost Girl and various shows like that. And so, yeah.
John, what did you think about the show?
Again, I didn't see it, but from Mel saying that the Lady Shiva is in it, I might have to see if it's on HBO Max, or sorry, just Max now. Is it streaming anywhere?
It's streaming somewhere.
It's probably on Max.
You get me curious.
I've been a Lady Shiva fan ever since she showed up in issue 1 of The Question.
Okay. Fraser, what about you?
Oh, I bet you it's not streaming.
Oh,
and I will tell you why it's probably not streaming, because it's the same reason Witchblade isn't streaming. This was back in the era where you had awesome soundtracks done by groups like Tattoo and everything else. They can never get the licensing rights to reissue them. Because I remember I was watching Witchblade and I'd be writing down all the music as the Witchblade episodes were playing. And they did the same thing with the music and stuff like that. But it's out on DVD somewhere.
Yeah, the DVDs are pretty cheap. Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks like it's on Tubi for free.
Oh, is it on Tubi?
Yeah.
It's on Tubi.
So, Fraser, what about you in the series?
Okay, by the time Birds of Prey came along, after the Batman show in the 60s, people who did comic book based shows tended to shun actual comic book based stuff. The Spider-Man show in the 70s, he fights occasional mad scientists, mostly terrorists and gang bosses, and that was the standard. And as Mel says, this one, they're actually using comic book material. Huntress, Black Canary, Batgirl, well, Oracle, however mutated from the originals. It had a good cast. As I am not a Mia Sarah fan, I was pleasantly surprised she played such a great lunatic as Harleen Quinzel. And Rachel Scarston, who would as the little Dinah, would later go on to be the awesome, crazy Alice on Batwoman.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a good time with it. In hindsight, I think it was the first of the long run of Batman TV shows that somehow don't have Batman in them. And no, he wasn't dead. He was just gone somewhere. But
Yeah.
So in a sense, I would hold that as a black mark against it. But at the time, it did not have a problem. And yeah, I think it was a fun show.
It actually surprised me that Batman and Joker both make very brief appearances in the pilot.
Oh,
That actually surprised me. I was not expecting that.
Yeah, I actually liked it. I was disappointed that Dinah was a kid who didn't know how to use her powers, Black Canary, and that her mother was the Black Canary who had the powers and the skills. And I thought I'll also say that Dina Meyer was just spot on as Barbara Gordon. And it didn't bother me that Huntress had powers, but I sort of was disappointed overall that it didn't have quite the same vibe that the comic book did, because when you have three adult women working together, or three adults of either gender, whatever mix you have, that's a different dynamic from two adults and a kid. It's just going to be different. And I liked the dynamic in the comic book a lot. I was disappointed it didn't go another season because I thought it might hit its stride. Back in the old days, Hill Street Blues took almost an entire season to find its audience, and then it became a runaway hit. And nothing gets an entire season to find its audience anymore. It's just,
look at Star Trek. How long did it take those to?
Oh yeah.
I got a chance once to very briefly speak with Dina Meyer, and she said that she thought it would have been a lot better show in season 2, and it just didn't get there.
Yeah, which is too bad. But let's shift gears and talk about the movie. And I will say right off the bat that I have not seen it, and no offense to the fans of Harley Quinn, but she gets on my last nerves. So I was not going to see it. But, if other people did and they enjoyed it, that's great. So, Mel, will you start us off about the movie?
Okay, there's no way to talk about the movie without first talking about Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn has had so many reincarnations that she makes Batman look staid and boring. You've got her everywhere, from a psychologist who's just a little bit on the weird side for falling for Joker, which I could never understand because Joker, to you've got the version of her that's basically a whore with a heart of gold. You have that version. You have the absolute off-the-wall maniac who runs around with a big, huge club in her little jester suit and whacking on everybody. And what I find interesting is, if you look at it the right way, they're all the same person. Because Harley Quinn is brilliant and insane at the same time. That being said, if you had told me I would watch a movie with Harley Quinn as the main character, I'd be like, yeah, no, she's comic relief. She's a little weird. I kind of enjoy the flirting with her and Poison Ivy. That's kind of fun. Those two make a really cute couple, actually. And then Margot Robbie got cast in that role. Margot Robbie is insane. And I'm saying she's insane because she sinks into a character and makes that character sparkle. I mean, I just finished watching her in Barbie a couple weeks ago, and she is an incredible actress. And I am not quite sure anybody else could have made Harley Quinn as interesting. So instead of getting the Batman story that you think you're going to get by Birds of Prey, you get a Harley Quinn story that's about a person trying to find a way out of an abusive situation. She knows it's abusive. She knows she's insane, and she still can't seem to figure out how to rewire her brain. Sorry, I'm double checking. I already had one instance this morning where the cat brought in the live chipmunk and let it loose. So the cat was walking in, and I'm like, "What's in your mouth?" So, yeah, for that part, it's entertaining. It is got. Remember, you were talking about how the dynamics of 3 adults is totally different. The dynamics with the women in this movie is just fascinating because they're not necessarily friends, but yet they're still women, and they have this shared place and of understanding that all the guys are kind of standing on the outside going, "We aren't getting this." The effects are over the top, and I am a total sucker. I mean, everybody complains about Michael Bay. Yeah, I like seeing all the explosions. The explosions are fun. It is a fun movie. Is it the best, most heartwarming movie in the world? No. But I think it presents Harley Quinn, who is still insane and should be executed on death row because of everything she's done throughout her incarnation. But it presents her in a much more understandable light, and also proves once again she's absolutely insane, which if you've watched any of the Suicide Squads, you know that she is.
Okay. Bobby?
Mm-hmm. I absolutely 100% agree with that. Harley Quinn, like Deadpool for me, works in movies and TV. I can't read them in the comics. I do not care for them in the comics. But the actors that have imbued them, certainly Margot Robbie is certainly, especially in that second Suicide Squad movie. Her whole arc. She's absolutely amazing in that. And then, of course, the Arlene Sorkin's version in the animated series was very, is very, up there, kind of created the character. And, but so I enjoyed the movie. I enjoyed the Birds of Prey and Harley movie. It's one of those things you can't compare it to the comic because it's not like any Birds of Prey comic I have read. Now, I understand the newer versions kind of have Harley in them, so I know there's some of that has happened. But as long as I could as long as I wasn't going in expecting it to be this, I enjoyed it for what it was. It is an entertaining movie. It's a little out there, but you know what? That's what you kind of expect and really, it is a Harley Quinn movie with the Birds of Prey in it. And
I want to do one other shout out, just because we're talking about how the actor makes a role. Suicide Squad, and I'm pretty sure she has at least a cameo in Birds of Prey. The actress who plays Waller.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God. Waller is a stone cold bitch. And that is what that character is. And the actress nails it because that actress or that incarnation of Waller would pull a gun out, double tap you, and keep right on talking as if she hadn't fought, as if she had shoot away a fly.
Yeah, Viola Davis. Yeah,
yes.
She
Actresses can make a difference.
She is quite, and yes, because they haven't tried to make her nicer for this. Waller is all business and doesn't, and they've continued to do that where she'll do whatever it takes. And, whether, like you said, she'll shoot somebody if that's what's needed. So I enjoyed the movie. I thought it was fun. I enjoyed the actors. Mary Elizabeth Winstead is always good. Journey Smollett was really good as Black Canary. So I enjoyed the actors. Ewan McGregor, I thought, made a pretty decent bad guy. So it was fun, but it's not, like I said, it's just, I didn't go, as long as you don't go in expecting it to be the comic you've read and you just go in for it to be what it is, it's enjoyable.
Okay. John?
Okay. I started watching it. I stopped watching it and never really got back to it. Mainly because I was hoping for a Birds of Prey movie that would have Harley Quinn in it. And, be quite honest, it was not my Birds of Prey. and I didn't really feel like watching that version. I think there's been, and this is a discussion for another time, but there's way too much Harley Quinn out there. And the only version I really like is the one that's presented in Batman White Knight. And turns out there are two of them, but there's a good explanation for it. But I just never really got back into it. And I keep telling myself, one of these days I'm going to go to Max and watch the thing.
Okay. Fraser?
First off, I've got to say nobody's ever written Waller as well as John Ostrander and Kim Yale in Suicide Squad, because they actually wrote her as somebody who was a human being, even if she was doing hard, rotten things. She was aware there was a cost, and she was aware there were times maybe she needed to hold back. And nobody really gets her as anything but a borderline monster now. For Harley Quinn, my favorite is still the Arlene Sorokin Batman the Animated Adventure, and that look in the comics. The more recent Looney with the giant hammer does not work at all. In the movie, yeah, Margot Robbie makes it work. I went in knowing it was not going to have anything to do with the Birds of Prey we know other than names, and taking it in that, and believe me, it makes the old Birds of Prey TV show look like a model of fidelity to the comics. But going in that mind, it was a load of fun. I enjoyed it. Favorite line, I think, oh, wait, stop. This is where you take out a bunch of torture devices and you get them ready for use, where you're telling me how you've got plans and I don't fit into them. Am I right? Was, of course, right.
Wayland, what about you?
I thought it was remarkably uneven. I mean, Margot Robbie is absolutely brilliant, 100%. The woman they cast for Black Canary, I know Bobby just said her name and I can't remember.
Journey Smollett.
She was fantastic. I would love to see more of her. Cassandra Cain as a 12-year-old pickpocket? No, you lost me there completely. Every scene she was in, I was like, this would have worked with a different character. But it's like I've said about some other stuff. I'm going to write a Batman story. But in my story, Batman works for a newspaper, and he works in a city where everything's all bright and clean. Oh, and he can fly and he can shoot lasers out of his eyes. It's not a Batman story at that point. And that was no version of Cassandra Cain. The movie was entertaining. It had a couple of good points, but it was so far off from anything I'm used to that I've only seen it the once, and I usually rewatch my hero movies a lot, and I don't think I'm going to be revisiting that one.
Well, I think that was my problem. Like you said, and like John said, it's not my Birds of Prey. And given that mixed in with my feelings about Harley as a character, I just didn't feel incentivized to go to that movie. But obviously a lot of people enjoyed it, and Margot Robbie I agree with everything you all said about the actors. We're actually coming up on time. So let's drift back to the comic book one more time for a few minutes. Why do you think no incarnation of Birds of Prey has run successfully since the original that went 125 issues? And if you can tell me in a few words who you would put on the Birds of Prey, if you were putting the team together, that would be good. And this will be the last round before we wrap up. Bobby, what about you?
Well, I think certainly comics, the way comics are put together and sold these days have changed. Just like how we produce, we receive entertainment, how we receive movies and TV. People are not buying monthly comics like they used to. So, I mean, there are still quite a few. I mean, I'm not decrying that monthly comics are dead or anything, but a lot of people don't read them that way. A lot of people get their fix in trades. Mm-hmm. And so the longevity of a long running series that runs a few hundred issues is not as important to the publisher anymore. They're putting out a trade, giving it a subtitle, and then they'll put out another one later. It's like there's your movie. We'll give you another movie in 6 months. And so the idea of a long running, just 124 issues or whatever is not their main focus anymore. It's just, okay, you've got 6 issues to tell this story. When you're done, we'll let somebody else tell 6 issues. So, excuse me. So that's kind of the way we make comics has changed, and the way we read comics has changed. If I was putting the team together, I know certainly Oracle is not really an option now because Barbara is no longer Oracle. She's Batgirl again. But definitely I would love to see Dinah and Helena team up, maybe with someone else where they could do that. I love the Mission Impossible setup. Have these just a couple of characters and then bring in who you need. And I love that setup. And so, yeah, that would be cool to see.
Okay, John?
Okay. Actually, there was a just canceled sort of incarnation of Birds of Prey. It was called Batgirls, where you had Barbara at headquarters who acting as Oracle, directing Cassandra Cain and what's the other
Stephanie,
who were Batgirls, and in what they were doing. But so she can act. She acts occasionally as Batgirl, and she does act as Oracle as needed. But I would like to start with Barbara as Oracle, calling Dinah, saying, we have a problem. It's got time to get the team back together. Well, the team's kind of split up. All right, get a team together. Who do you want? And, you bring in, well, got Cassandra. The new one's got Cassandra Cain in it, who's one of my favorite characters. Hawkgirl, and all that. And it's sort of like, not going to like this. Like what? Last member of the team. Who? This one. We need Crazy. We need Harley. And the same team, but you have to have Barbara in it, be the Birds of Prey. But at least the team is all women. And that's basically, I've only read the first issue of it, but basically Harley doesn't want to do it at first. And it's sort of like, well, we need you. And they tell her wife, she goes, okay, come in. So I would go with basically the team they've got, but with Barbara working as Oracle, helping to direct.
Okay, Fraser?
I think part of the problem is that it's not just that the original series ended, but how many reboots of continuity have there been since then?
Mm-hmm.
As a lifelong comics fan, I had a deep, abiding attachment to the universe, even after the Crisis on Infinite Earths reboot, that the original Birds of Prey took place in. I have no attachment to the current universe. I'm not even sure what it is. And I think they're still doing more and more reboots because that's all DC can imagine right now. Over at Marvel, they get the same results by, oh, that was just a memory implant. It never happened for various characters. And so it's much harder to get invested in a character or a series than it used to be. Also, Barbara is no longer Oracle. Well, she's no longer in a wheelchair. She's Batgirl again, which was a bonehead decision by Dan Didio, who I believe was the imprimatur of it, was the instigator of it. And so I think those combined, they just don't have the momentum that the original series did. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work as well for me. Whether that's the problem for everybody who isn't buying it, I can't say. If I were putting together a team, definitely Barbara, definitely Dinah. Beyond that, I would look for low-level power types, Emiko Queen, odd choices who haven't been on it before. Vicky Vale, she's an extremely capable photojournalist. If you can lose Lois for one story, you could probably use Vicky for something, assuming she's still around and not dead. And try to keep getting the Mission Impossible approach, constantly rotating who is on it with a basic core would probably be what I go with, and see what happens. If a particular good combination comes up and like yeah, these people work well together, then stick with that.
Okay, Wayland?
I think the reason we haven't seen another run was because they had a very unique set of circumstances for that run. That comic book was built on relationships, and people are not presently writing stories like that in most of the comics. Gail Simone did a lot of the writing for that huge run, and she absolutely adored those characters, and it showed. And you put those two things together, no one's been able to reach that level since, because writers who love the characters aren't being given enough of a chance to let things work out that way. If I was doing a team, I was thinking about this a little, I'd probably go with a lot of obscure ones. Barbara leading, absolutely. Dinah as field commander, and certainly to a Mission Impossible aspect if you need specialists, but I would pull Akrata from Mexico, who can teleport through shadows. Kate Spencer, Manhunter, because she's got a really hard edge to her and got some pretty cool tech toys. And maybe Nightshade from the old Charlton Heroes and Suicide Squad for a while. I think that'd be a really interesting combo, and then definitely pull in specialists as needed.
Okay, Mel?
So when you asked the question, I interpreted it totally differently.
Well, that's okay.
So what I think would work, and that I would be ponying up my money if somebody wants to do a Kickstarter on this, do a set of like 10 episode runs where you have 10 books in it, and get people like Gail Carriger, Alice Walker, Amy Tan, Naniti Okafor, women to write stories where they aren't just taking on the Joker or Penguin, they're taking on sex trafficking. They're taking on the drug cartels using young women as mules. They're taking on these things that are very often specifically women-oriented crime, domestic abuse, the way that even to this day you have servants and maids who are told, well, you're not going to be able to get out. We're going to basically control you. They're slaves. I would love to see a set of like 4 or 5 where you're taking some of the writers of today and have them tell these stories that are much more focused on how having powers doesn't make you immune to what a lot of other women are facing. And see, and I don't know artists well enough to be able to list the artists, but you would just want artists that can really do that. One of the images I remember most from one of the Batman things is where Batman is tied up. He's basically been crucified. He still has his mask up, and you can just see the pain in every line of that drawing and the blood running down. I want artists that can do that, because if we can get the writers and an artist whose vision matches, it really almost doesn't matter whether it's Dinah and Huntress and Barbara in any incarnation. It is taking the Birds of Prey, setting them up as the Charlie's Angels. Write that story. Okay, we finished it. Now the next author is going to come in and say, hey, I want to write a story that involves these. And they write the story. That's what I think would really catch people's attention and kind of expose an entire new generation to the power of Birds of Prey.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we are actually at time now. So let's go around quickly, tell people where they can find information about you and your work. If you have a recent or upcoming release you want to highlight, this is the time. John?
Hey, I'm John O. French. You can find my books on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. I am active on Facebook. My newest book is In the Ruins of Caroline, and those who know me will be surprised to find out that it is a collection of fantasy stories involving a knight who starts out as a sword for hire and works his way to becoming a hero.
Fraser?
You can find me online at frasersherman.com. I'm also at Blue Sky. I'm not sure how you search Blue Sky, and on Twitter as Bogatir5. My most recent publication was 19 Infinity, a collection of 20th century set historical fantasy stories. It came out this summer from my imprint, Behold the Book.
Okay. Wayland?
I'm on pretty much all the socials as some variation of Wayland Smith or Wayland Smith 1 or whatever, depending. I review pretty much all of the superhero-based TV shows and movies and some of the comics on a site called comicbookclog.com. I didn't name it. I just work there. I have, among my books that are out, I have a series about superhuman mercenaries called Wildside. Those are on Amazon or wherever else you get books. And I pop up at random at conventions whenever I find one that's not sick of me yet.
Mel?
You can find me at Badash Publishing. I am on most social media platforms as Badash Books. And I have the last book in my Twisted Luck series launches November 3rd. And so now I have to figure out what else I'm supposed to be writing.
Okay. Bobby?
I'm Bobby Nash. You can find me at bobbynash.com. I'm on all the social medias at Bobby Nash, author Bobby Nash on Facebook, Bobby Nash on Twitter, Bobby Nash Writes on Instagram, and I'm on Blue Sky and all that as well. Same thing. I don't know how the addresses on all that works, but you can find me on those. I've had several anthology work come out recently. Since this is a comic show, I'm very excited. I wrote a comic series that's more geared toward young adult teenagers and 10 and 12 and up. That comes out in December from Abdo Books, which primarily their primary audience is libraries. It's a book series called Crimes in Time, and it's 6 standalone stories that's crime fiction set during real historical events. And so the publisher gave me 6 events, 6 disasters, and says, okay, add some crime to that. So, but they will be in libraries and available to purchase as well come December 15th. So I'm very excited.
You can find me at nancynorthcott.com. I'm still on Twitter or whatever it's called this week as Nancy Northcott. On Blue Sky, I'm Nancy North. My latest release is The King's Champion, the 3rd in the Boar King's Honor series, and it's a World War II set fantasy. Thank you to everyone on the panel. Thank you to all of you who are watching. And thank you to our sponsors, Heroes Aren't Hard to Find and Heroes Convention. For more information about them, visit heroesonline.com.